While the growth of remittances, this is growth of remittances, and this means negative growth, and this means positive growth, okay, as percent growth. So while we reached peak growth between 2007 and 2008, the recession hit and screwed everybody out of their jobs, including migrants. And now the remittances are actually under negative percent growth. And while as the recession ends, we might have some recovery, we're going to be nowhere near where we once were in terms of the percent growth of remittances. So the remittance economy is growing at it's not growing that much faster than inflation. So that means that as families that have become quite dependent on remittances go into, they're going to be suffering, okay? That's the point. So, one of the things that we have to do before we move on, we have to talk about some problems with this basic model of what we think remittances are. And there's a few classes of problems with this model. And one of them has to do with who's sending and who's receiving remittances. So, in this popular model, migrants are sending money to the households in their country of origin, where they were born, right? Or where they were raised, or something, where they hold citizenship. But because there are protracted refugee situations around the world, and also because the global economy is pretty complex, and so are migrant labor networks, it might be the case that a migrant is sending remittances to just some other country. And it's actually not even the case that remittances are sent to different countries. Remember my case. My family lives in California, New York, New Jersey, and now New Mexico, and Providence, Rhode Island. So that's the same country, different states. So these are internal remittances, and so these types of remittance corridors, they contain a whole different set of costs and benefits that we have to take into account. But most remittance data that is available is international remittances. Another thing that you could define as a remittance would be donations sent by some entity that has to do with migration, like a hometown association. These groups of migrants, they get together and they hang out, they pool their resources, and sometimes, which are quite a lot of resources, and they invest them in some cause in the home country. This is a totally different phenomenon. And it's a remittance that's being sent by a group of people, right? So these people, this is like a collective action problem, right? So these people are getting together and they're pooling their resources and sending them somewhere else. We have to investigate it in a different way. Another class of problems has to do with what direction remittances are being sent. So we assumed before that remittances are sent from migrants to the host country, but they could go the other way around. And the weight of these ties between remittances, or between migrants and say, households in the home country, it might change over time. It might be constant. Maybe, in some cases, migrants keep receiving remittances from the home country. We need to investigate that, rather than just assume. And then finally, it is the case that migrants and groups of migrants have an array of possible destinations to which they could send remittances. And what's the corollary to this? The flip side. What would be the flip side be that a migrant can send remittances to different destinations? Yeah, you can have remittances can flow from different sources. Okay? And finally, migrants don't just send money. As I showed you earlier, talked about earlier, and we receive clothes, and that's called an in-kind remittance. It's a valuable good. It might have monetary value, but it has some other value too, and so it could be groceries, could be medicine, and oftentimes these in-kind remittances are sent in lieu of monetary remittances because these types of goods they're being sent are particularly expensive in the destination. Okay, at the destination. Yes?
So a care package to a college student, That's exactly what I was.
That's a remittance.
Yeah.
That is a remittance, yes. Yeah, so, you know, if we wanted to look at remittances here in the States, that would be one big thing to look at. Because college is a source of your human capital, right? It's like, you go to college and it improves your job opportunity and stuff, right? It does. I promise you. Stay in school. Yeah, exactly. Care package. A care package to a soldier in Iraq is remittance. And that's not being sent to the home country, right? My brother's not from Iraq. He's from Santa Clara, California. So what all this is telling us is that remittances are a complex set, and a very large set, of sharing behaviors associated with migration. And behavior, just in general, can be affected by multiple things. They can be affected by social structure, whether the social structure within which the sharing is going on, or the level of social aggregation at which the sharing takes place. So an individual to a household versus a hometown association to. Right? And behavior is affected by environmental conditions, as we saw with the earthquake in Haiti, right? So there was an earthquake, people needed money, remittances flowed into Haiti as soon as the corridors reopened, like, you know, they hadn't been sent before, although Haiti receives a lot of remittances. They're affected by social norms, prevailing social norms that people hold about sharing and about making donations, okay? And their expectations about what they should get, right, in sharing exchanges. And these social norms are paired with the cognitive tendencies that we have as human beings, which are, at least partially, derived from our evolutionary history. And they might have been derived in environments that are very similar to the one that we have, the one in which we live today, in some respects, but in other respects, quite different. And there are, of course, important interactions between these feedback mechanisms, between these different causal variables. Well, my thesis, upon which this talk is based, criticizes all the prior theory, right? Oh, this is weak. You know, the theory about these feedback mechanisms. So how do environmental conditions relate to cognitive tendencies, right? How do they relate to our social norms? How are social norms, a sort of that change according to a certain cultural evolutionary process, interact with our cognitive tendencies, which we can at least temporarily think of as being something that's the product of evolution, genetical evolution. Okay. So, and then how do these things interact too? Sociology and economics have a good idea about how these things interact, and they do it better than we do, but they don't do a good job of that. Okay. What I suggest is that, so I'm a biocultural anthropologist, right? What we do is we take biology and culture and we say these things intersect in some non-trivial way, and that their intersection, their interaction, shapes behavioral and physiological variation. So we're not talking about physiological variation right now, we're talking about behavioral variation. So culture and biology together are shaping remittance behavior. Okay? And we do this under a very broad framework of modern evolutionary theory. Question? Oh, you're waiting. Amy. Anybody have any questions so far? Okay. Whoop. Hello. What's your name?
Amy.
Hi, Amy. I'm Benjamin. So I'll backtrack now. No, I'm just joking. I'm just kidding. I'm messing with you. I'm messing with you. Okay. All right, so what is modern evolutionary theory? I'm going to talk about it very broadly. Evolution can happen wherever information is transmitted and it can undergo error or some kind of innovation. So new variants can be produced or combined, okay? It happens wherever that occurs. It can be, the information that's being transmitted could be genetic and affect the genotype, which in turn affects our phenotypes in interaction with the environment. It could be ideas, which interact with our psychological tendencies to shape our behavior, which also interacts with our genes. And so what this does is what evolution does is it's a variation-producing machine, and what can happen is that if you have these pie charts represent the relative frequency